Let's take a look then at the year in review. He got those 3 victories that we just mentioned, 8 top 10 finishes in some 20 PGA Tour starts. He finished in the top 15 in 3 majors, 4th at the Tour Championship, and went 3-1-0 to help the United States win the President's Cup. So I would say all in all it's been a pretty successful year. But, you know, to your point, he had been talking for a couple of years about wanting to win again on the PGA Tour. It had been a while since the beginning of 2019. Perhaps, you know, the catalyst was the team victory with Patrick Cantlay. I think what's next for Xander Schauffele, you would expect, is a major championship. He's come so close, particularly at US Opens. He's often contended, but never quite been close enough to get one of those big 4 wins.
Yeah, and until this year, he'd played 18 major championships, and he'd actually finished in the top 10, and half of them he'd been second twice, he'd been third twice. And it's his consistency, I think, in a way, becomes a burden on Xander, because he does, if you even look through his entire statistical profile, there are no wild fluctuations there. Everything is so solid throughout the bag year to year. And over the last 5 seasons, he's accumulated 35, I think it is, top 10 finishes in that time. And there weren't a lot of trophies until we got to this year. And that just becomes, in a way, a burden, because you're constantly there. You're in the frame every week. And if you're not leaving with the trophy, it can become kind of a millstone around your neck. And Xander Schauffele, to me, is proof of how difficult it is to win out there. And it's not as though he's underachieving at this point. He has 7 wins on the PGA Tour, and this year I think is his breakthrough the year, though. At one point he'd fallen out of the top 10 when he missed the cut at Augusta National. He left the top 10 in the official world golf rankings. By the time he left the US Open, he was down to 15th. He's now up to 6th in the world rankings, and we just saw on that full screen there why he's made his way back by clawing his way up through victories. Particularly the one that impressed me was the Genesis Scottish Open, because that was a particularly strong field, and it's an unfamiliar style of golf for most American golfers. He's proven adept at that as well, because people will tend to forget that one of his second place finishes was in the Open at Carnoustie that Molinari won back in 2018. So he does have some adaptability as he moves around. He's proven a more kind of adept international player than a lot of his peers have. I think he's perfectly positioned for a breakout run. He had 3 solid finishes in the majors this year, but I think he's now past solid finishes. I think he wants the top finish.
I like what you said, perfectly positioned, you know, ready to pounce, perhaps. You know, the Scottish Open was so impressive because, as you mentioned before, it was in back-to-back starts. You know, I think back to the team events and what they can do for one's confidence. And we've just come off a President's Cup last month, and it was his President's Cup debut, in fact his US team debut at Royal Melbourne back in 2019, part of Tiger's team. They all flew down under together. That's a very long journey from the United States, and that is when this friendship with Patrick Cantlay formed. You know, they spent ages just sitting playing cards on the plane, realised that they're pretty similar, and as we know, have struck up this wonderful friendship that includes holidays to Napa at the end of the FedEx Cup season each year, and time with each other's respective halves. I think perhaps spurring each other on the golf course too. You know, they had that team win in New Orleans. It's amazing how much he may have been able to learn from Patrick, and I'm sure vice versa. But for 2 people at the height of their game, so high in the world rankings, to be so close, it's rare, don't you think? You know, we've seen a Jordan Spieth and a Justin Thomas, but, you know, there must be benefits to the amount of time these 2 spend together, given what they do for a living.
There has to be, and it makes me wonder. You know, I've heard Rory McIlroy say in the past that everyone benefits from becoming friends with and being mentored by people who are better than you, who've accomplished more than you, because it gives you something to aim for. And it's interesting that he and Cantlay have become so close, both West Coast guys, but neither one of them has a major championship yet. Cantlay's record is considerably poorer than Xander's in major championships at this stage. But it's definitely interesting that they've bonded well together. But Xander Schauffele is also one of those characters who fits seamlessly into almost any company. Probably you can't say the same about Cantlay. He might be a slightly different fit. But Xander is also not intimidated by the competition around him. When you look at the events he wins, I mean, the Century Tournament of Champions, you've got to have won on the PGA Tour to get into that field. Obviously, the Genesis this year was a big one. And don't overlook the JP McManus Pro-Am. Xander Schauffele also walked away with that. And, you know, pretty much every big name in the game was there that week at Adair Manor in Ireland. But Xander Schauffele, you know, you can say it's a hit and giggle event. I didn't see too much giggling going on from the players over there who were pretty serious about it. And Xander Schauffele walked away with the title on that one, and that was the week of the Genesis Scottish Open. So he got 2 trophies for 1 week's work.
Yeah, you're right. He came into the Open with those wins in the Travellers, Scottish Open, you know, Adair Manor with the Pro-Am. He was on such an impressive run, and we'll see, of course, what next year holds for him, as he's in his last year in his 20s and certainly knows how to celebrate. We've seen him enjoying the cigars, haven't we, at the President's and Ryder Cup.